What's up, people? It's Multiplier, and it's another massive tutorial. Massive. Right, it's a bit of an advanced one today. I say advanced, it's not that advanced, but it's certainly something that you don't kind of do as soon as you start making your first presets. But saying that, it's something that I really think, especially if your workflow kind of incorporates playing out riffs and melodies kind of on a MIDI controller or a MIDI keyboard, I really think you should be taking advantage of this because you'd be mad not to. Anyway, it's all about velocity. So first few minutes are going to be theory, and then I'll give you some examples. So what is velocity? So whenever you trigger a MIDI note, kind of from your keyboard, say, kind of into your kind of Ableton or whatever else it is, it's not just sending kind of the note information to Ableton, say, it's also sending a whole bunch of other information. So typically, even the cheap keyboards will send a bit of velocity information as well, but some advanced keyboards can even send other things like aftertouch info and a whole bunch of other stuff. But we're just talking about velocity. Velocity is kind of a measure of how hard you press on the note, i.e. the velocity at which you kind of hit it. So the reason why keyboards and stuff send this extra bit of information is because in real life, if you're playing like a piano or a harpsichord or a guitar or a bongo drum, kind of how hard you whack away at it determines the character of the sound, not just the volume. So you'll notice, say, on a piano, it's kind of, you hear extra harmonics and stuff. If you kind of hit the note really hard, sounds a bit kind of sharper, versus if you press it really gently. And what you really want to do is when you're programming on your massive presets, or even any other synth for that matter, you want to have a similar thing happen kind of by using this extra information. It just makes it sound more musical, and especially when you're kind of jamming away, kind of coming up with a riff, even if this kind of extra dynamic to it's quite subtle, it just makes the whole thing more interesting and more kind of expressive and more musical, which is what we want at the end of the day, right? Something that's more musical. So how do you want velocity to affect your preset? So I'd say more often than not, it's probably better to do it in quite a subtle way. It's something that I've started doing in all my presets now, not just some of them. Again, I probably use it a bit more subtly, more than kind of really non-subtly, but you can use it in quite a crazy way if you want as well. So yeah, I should probably give you a few examples of the sort of thing I mean. So obviously, because it's hard for me to show you exactly how hard I'm whacking away at the keys, what I will do is I'll do like 3 soft notes and then 3 hard ones, and then you can hear the difference. So I've got kind of like a bass preset to give you a bit of an example. As I said, it's quite subtle, the difference, but yeah, let's see if you can hear it or not. So yeah, here we go. And again. So it's quite an aggressive sound, but hopefully you heard that like the second 3 notes, kind of the hard ones, had a bit more of a kind of top-endy sort of ring to them. So it still sounds like the same note, but it just sounds like a bit more, it's almost like if it was a real instrument, like it'd been hit a bit harder, which is exactly what you want. Ideally, you want the harder you press to correlate in a similar way to how on a musical instrument, if you pluck the note a bit harder or hit the key a bit harder, how that translates too. So I'll give you another example, but that's quite a subtle one. Oh, I'll show you how I did it for a start. It's probably a good idea. So there's 2 ways to do velocity stuff in Massive, and it's, yeah, I'll show you one way. So one way is using the envelopes. That's how I did it here. So you've got to notice that I'm using the envelopes here to kind of open up 2 filters. So we've got the second envelope, opening up a filter here and opening up a filter here. This is one of the best ways to use kind of velocity stuff to make it sound natural. Is if you're opening a filter, kind of opening it up from kind of low to high. If you use this velocity slider here, this kind of determines kind of how much the velocity affects how far it opens up. So if you whack the velocity meter to the top, then if you play the note kind of really softly, the filter will pretty much not open up at all. Whereas if you press the note really hard, it will open up all the way. And naturally in the middle, does it in the middle. If you pull the velocity slider all the way down, this means that it's not kind of using the velocity information at all, which is the default. So yeah, just to give you another idea, I'll do 3 soft and 3 hard with the velocity meter all the way down. And now with the velocity meter all the way up. See what I mean? It's pretty cool, right? It's best to just kind of balance it for whatever sounds good for your preset, in which case it sounded good for me here. Now I should probably find another preset to kind of show you the other way to map velocity information. So let's have a look through. I wonder if one of these bass does it, or let's try another one. It's probably better. Let's go back into the bass massive electro bass. Let's try this dude. Yeah, this should be a good example. Let's double check. Cool, so this one's a bit different. So yeah, I'll give you one more quick demo of this particular sound. So as you can see, the second one's a bit more kind of, got more texture to it, a bit more kind of growly. This preset probably needs a little bit of work, but you get the idea that it sounds a bit different with a bit more velocity. So what I did in this particular one is, let's see if I use the envelope stuff as well. So yeah, I've got a little bit of the, as you see in this slider here, I am using some velocity information on the envelope here in quite an aggressive way, which controls the wavetable position of this oscillator number 2. As you can see here. But what I've also done is mapped it to the amplitude, and you can see it with this little V here, circle effect. And how do you get that little V? So you click this little arrow down here by the macro controls, click, and then you click where you want it. So do another click, and then you get your V, and then you can drag it around. And as you can probably guess from now, kind of how hard you hit it determines how far in this kind of yellow bit that goes around it opens up. So if I moved it all the way around, then if I hit the note really hard, it would open it all the way. Whereas if I hit it pretty softly, it wouldn't really open it much at all. So that's the idea. So you don't have to just have your envelopes controlling all the velocity stuff, but you can map the velocity to various knobs to do shit. I'd say it's easier to get going by just doing it with the envelope way, just simply because it sounds a bit more natural. Typically, especially if you start using filters and stuff, if you kind of do that as your way, you're kind of using the velocity stuff. But it's also useful to know that you can just do it with with this little button here. And kind of chuck that in wherever suits. So you can see here, I've got it affecting the level a little bit as well on this envelope, so you can combine this kind of velocity slider as well as this level bit, which is cool stuff. So yeah, that's 2 examples. I should probably try and find you one more example since we got a few more minutes. I'll try and find a pad example because that can sound pretty cool. I should have some of the new pack I started a few days ago. 1 and 2, brilliant. Let's try the second one. See what this sounds like. Can't remember, to be honest. So yeah, I'll do 3 soft and 3 hard just to give you an idea. Oh, fuck, pressed it too hard. So as you can see, it sounds quite different depending on how hard I press. It's just kind of a pad sort of sound. You can see I got the velocity thing kind of mapped here with this V, pulling the cutoff around on a filter. That's quite a nice way of doing it. I've also got the velocity slider on this envelope pulled up, and on the second one, using it a little bit there, not too much. But yeah, that's cool stuff. That's how you use velocity to kind of add some more interest to your massive presets. This won't make any sense to you if you draw in all your MIDI by hand. I suppose you could just hand draw the velocity information, but then you might as well just use a macro knob if you're hand drawing everything in. This is pretty much for when you're kind of live playing stuff, and especially if you're kind of playing shit live, you really need to be using this kind of stuff, which is cool. So yeah, that's the video. Velocity. Sorry there wasn't more Skrillex jokes. I thought I'd give you some knowledge for a change. I've done a few jokey videos, so it's always good. Try to keep it concise as well, giving you examples, so taking your feedback on board. And yeah, I'd say have a go with that velocity. Some more stuff to have a look at if you've kind of got a feel for that is to have a look. If you have an appropriate keyboard, i.e. a really good keyboard or something like the Ableton Push, which has this functionality, is this AT guy down here, which is aftertouch. It looks a bit like an A. Same idea as velocity, except aftertouch is once you've triggered the note, by kind of holding the note down and varying the amount of pressure you put on the note, it sends a varying kind of signal, which is the aftertouch. So it's worth having a play about with. If you understand velocity, you can figure out aftertouch as well. It's worth knowing you can do it with the macro knobs. Also this KTR, which is short for key tracking, which is pretty cool. The idea being, depending on where you are on the keyboard, so let's say you're low down on the keyboard, it won't move very far up this kind of yellow bit. Whereas if you press the note right at the top of the keyboard, it would kind of move the knob to somewhere near the top. The reason why there is key tracking is just like velocity, there is an analog to kind of real life musical instruments. And that's because a lot of the times in real life, depending on what kind of, whether it's a high note or a low note on the musical instrument, determines the character of the sound as well. So sometimes it's nice to know you can program in that kind of change in massive as well. So have a play around with that. I might as well tell you the last little macro knob, which is the trigger random TRR. What that does, it just says R for random, pretty random. Actually, it's not random at all. R stands for random. It just means every time you press the note, it moves the knob to a random point kind of around there, which is cool shit. There you go. Chucked in some more tips. Got your value for money. Cool stuff up in multiplier. Boom, video done. That's pretty serious. No, a bit lame. Gay.